Love it when you say I'm the gold inside your gold mine, and I love the way you just make me shine, make me shine, make me shine, make me shine, make me shine. Government.
Yeah, hey, how's it going? This is the Fifth Stage Podcast. I'm Kyle Armstrong, and I'm joined, as always, with Ben and Emma. How's it going, guys?
It's going good.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we didn't expect this episode to even happen because it's fall break here, and I was kind of banking on the building being locked. But we're here. We're going to do a show anyways. And so this is going to be a little bit of improv. You know, we haven't planned anything out too much.
Because the show is usually very well planned out.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got an outline, everything. We got the stats guy here, Carl.
Carl's the mute.
Yeah, he's always here, though. He's just sitting here.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah. What a guy. What a guy. So, yeah, what are we going to be talking about today?
The plan is to talk about government and maybe politics a little bit in like a broad sense of what they should be at like a basic level, like what our definition of a government should be.
Yeah. And why are we going to be talking about that? I mean, I'm just wondering. Like yesterday, we were kind of discussing this a little bit. Like, should a government, like, what should the basic functions of a government be, right? And you'd be surprised. Like, everyone has different definitions for it, right? So that's what we're going to be like trying to dive into today. So I guess just start off. How do you want to start this?
Well, I guess we could each go around and maybe give like a one or a few sentence definition of like what we think a government should be from our American perspectives.
Yeah, I was thinking actually, let's see. I don't want to like undercut you, but on the importance of philosophy.com, right, which we talked about last week, there's the politics thing, and I was just going to list what our basic rights are that are listed in like the Constitution. I think that's a good way to start off. So we have the right to life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness, free speech, and self-defense. That's what our government thinks like is the most important things, right? So do we agree with those? And if not, why?
I agree with all of those.
Yeah, I agree with them too.
Okay, good. So our foundation of the government is on a solid ground. Yeah. That's good. So do we have any qualms with the current government? Not like political figures, obviously, but like the system itself, I guess.
System itself. I do.
All right, let's hear it.
This isn't even like a partisan argument, hopefully, I'm trying to make. I have a problem with government in the sense that I feel it's often hypocritical in what it says and like why it says it's doing something and like the actual reason it's doing those things. And I have a problem more with that hypocrisy than even like the reasons for why it would like do something. You know, even if I disagreed for what it was doing, that's less important to me than them being like hypocritical.
Can you give an example?
I can. I might have to ruminate on it for a moment.
Okay. I think, let's see. So you're saying government's hypocritical in a lot of aspects?
Yes.
Okay.
Which I just see as like unnecessary.
Yeah. I'd agree, like, hypocrisy is the one thing you want to try and avoid.
Because I think that results in like the most frustration for like the most amount of people. Because you're like disguising your true beliefs from people who might agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that like turns them off. And then the people who don't agree with what you're doing, then they see you as like even lying about it, which turns them off even more.
I could say one example just off the top of my head would be like how the government's supposed to be like for the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And provide mostly for the people. And yet most of our government is catered towards like businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And corporations.
I agree with that. I just saw of another example too
Okay.
that I think works. There's a lot of debate right now about the immigration issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like most of the arguments against immigration usually center around the perceived like economic impact it would have. When I think if you would ask most like economists, they would say that immigration usually helps the economy in the long run. So, and assuming that's true, let's just like assume that's true for the argument, then the government would obviously like have access to that kind of like information and knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's not the real reason. The real reason is probably more to do with like racism and discrimination. But they don't say that, even though that's like the reality.
They kind of do say that, at least these days.
Yeah,
That's true.
these days there's less pressure, but
Yeah.
in the past maybe.
Right.
But even then there was
Right.
some very racist overtones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I find it like all like insulting, and I bet most people would, when the government's trying to tell us one thing, or like obviously we know that can't be like the only reason.
Yeah, and most of the experts in the field are like, well, actually.
Right. And it's like
Well, actually, we have a lot of old people. So.
Yeah. So immigration helps.
Yeah.
Another callback.
Yeah.
Doing all
Yeah.
sorts of callbacks today. It's amazing.
so I would say that's like
That's the worst
Hypocrisy.
thing for a government, you'd say?
I would say it's always, maybe not the worst thing, but it's always a bad thing because it doesn't rely on like what your political beliefs even are.
Mm.
Because, you know, they're like disguising those, whatever they are.
Mhm.
So I would say it's always unnecessary.
That makes sense.
Hmm. And the reasons for why the government might be that way now more than like it maybe was in the past or was perceived to be, there could be a lot of reasons. Or maybe they are just more lying now than they used to be.
Well, that's tough to say.
Yeah.
Because we weren't around back in the day. But it does seem like fake news, the term that everyone loves to say, has been growing in the recent years.
Yeah.
Yep. So should we go around and your original idea and say what we think like a government should provide or...
Yeah.
Okay. You want to... Who wants to take that first? All right. Well, I haven't thought about it too much, but I guess I'll take it first. Let's see. I think a government... Most people like have a problem that the government is able to like decide certain freedoms, right? But I feel like that's the point of a government, and that you, as a citizen in society, have to accept that there's certain restrictions for a quote-unquote greater good, right? And so in order to do the most good for the most amount of people, some people are going to have to accept restrictions. And so that's how I would define a perfect government would be trying to provide like equal footing for the most amount of people. And even if that puts restrictions on some people, that's like innately happening in society, right? Because without society, you would have like warring kingdoms and like whoever's the strongest,
Yeah.
rules. But a society puts restrictions on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think government, the basic function of it is just like order. When you have a lot of people together, you know, you have to set some boundaries in order to avoid chaos. So I think that order and protection, I guess, are the main functions of a government.
Protection of like individual liberties?
Yeah, protection. I mean, in the broadest sense that you can define that, like,
Okay.
yeah, the government should make sure that everyone, you know, has their basic needs met or has a pathway to get those needs met. Yeah.
Makes sense.
I would agree with that. And I guess I would say government should, all those rights you said earlier, it should function to like enable and support those and keep general like order. That's a very like vague term because it's like a very complicated
Yeah.
concept. And then after that, it's not really required to do anything beyond that.
Okay. So you just want order as the main basis for society?
And I kind of liked what you said about like being in a society kind of like requires restrictions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the government should ideally be like groups of people willingly like putting those restrictions on themselves or like agreeing to be restricted in that way.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the problem with our modern politics is that people aren't willing to accept those restrictions, right? And you can just look at the gun debate for that, right? And the guns aren't really the issue because guns are a symbol of like freedom, right? And so by taking away guns, you're taking away freedom, essentially. But if you want to be part of a society where you can just look at the polls. I think it's like 80% favor harsher gun control, right? So the majority of the society is saying, well, like, yeah, it's freedom, but like we're going to restrict that for a quote unquote greater good again, right? And it's like you're saying, like for protection of individuals, that's what we're trying to. And I guess for government, we should really try and figure out what we think the central goal of it should be, right? And if you're saying order and you're saying personal protection, right, or protection of individual liberties, so I guess we place the most emphasis on like protection of human life, right, at the center of it all.
I'd say that's pretty important, yeah.
Okay.
To most people, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say maybe the goal is just like to allow people to like live how they want to live. And I know that's like, but what about like shooters and like things like that? But yeah, just to like give the most people like the most amount of like freedom and like how they want to live their life.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there a caveat to the whole pursuit of happiness thing? Like, as long as it doesn't encroach on someone else's rights.
And so I think, let's go back to that. I just closed the tab. But the first one is the right to life, right? So that's the core foundation of modern government, air quotes around that. Because that's what we see as being the most important thing. And it makes sense, right? Because no one wants to die, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the most basic. If you don't have that, then none of the rest of it
then
matters.
society doesn't even matter.
Right. And if you do, then you don't even need to like worry about society.
Yeah. So if government's just looking out for people to have the right to life as the first thing, I guess that's good. And then we're trying to get towards the more abstract ones as you go out towards like pursuit of happiness. That can mean a lot of things, right?
Right. And
that's pretty soul crushing when you think about it.
Yeah. Another thing I was thinking about is we were talking about basic needs and restrictions, right? I think I don't think anyone really debates that there are some basic needs that should be met and some restrictions that like should be enforced. But I think the problem is like everyone has a different definition of what the basic needs are. and what restrictions are actually like necessary.
Yeah, I think the internet actually was just listed as a basic human right recently.
Well,
Yeah,
so like
access to the internet.
How do you guys feel about that?
I feel like Spectrum is charging me way too much for this basic human right.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that, but like, I think a lot of people tend to think like basic rights are like set in stone, right? Like food or, you know, shelter should be a basic right. But I think as society progresses, you should change the definition of basic human rights. Not like, oh, that's so basic, but like, you know what I mean?
No, yeah, I mean, government in general shouldn't be set in stone ever. Like it should
Yes.
be
A living document.
Yeah, like the Constitution shouldn't be set in stone. It should be able to adapt to society. Going back to the gun debate.
Do you think our government does a bad job of adapting?
Yes. Full stop. No, I mean, there's a good idea at the core of it. I think the main problem with our government right now is like the speed that things can change is just not fast enough for modern society. You know, like it was designed when horses were like the fastest means of communication. So nowadays a news cycle changes every day, you know. We have 7 different like groundbreaking stories a week. And it's just impossible for the government to keep up. But I guess you don't want to like rush into a decision.
Right.
Too.
If things are changing so quickly, wouldn't it be dangerous to always be like adapting to that when it's like never set in stone?
Yeah. So it's a balance. I think ours is on the slow side though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
So how would you best change it?
Oh, boy.
Dictatorship?
Yeah,
Elected dictatorship?
let's go back to the Romans idea of dictatorship.
That word has such a negative meaning now, but didn't always used to be.
Yeah, I'm listening to a podcast about the Romans, by the way, so we're going to be talking about Rome for a while. But yeah, we should actually bring that up because it's an interesting idea and it worked for a long time in the past. Not during like imperial Rome, but during the Republic of Rome. You could have one man elected dictator and they stepped down, but they were given all the power to like fix things as they saw fit, which is scary, but it cuts a lot of red tape and makes it more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be able to elect like
Yeah,
someone
a benevolent
like that.
dictator
Yeah.
that would step down at the end, right?
Which, I mean, does that exist?
I think that could work
Yeah,
today.
George Washington was the
George
yeah,
Washington.
He-
the American Cincinnatus.
he could have been president for life if he wanted to.
Could have been king.
Could have been king.
What was it, like 2 conspiracies? 2 or 3?
Yeah, that people like wanted him
They were
to.
like telling him to be
and
king.
he was like, "Nah, I just want to go back to my farm."
Yeah.
And I think there are still people like that.
Yeah, I think it could work, but
But
obviously
do you think the American public is equipped to elect someone like that?
no.
Oh, I don't want to say no right away.
Just look at the last election
Yeah.
cycle.
I mean, if that's what people want.
That's not what people want. Nobody wants that.
It
right
wasn't the
now.
popular vote. Contrary to what you've been told.
It wasn't the popular vote.
That was fake news.
Yeah. Hillary
Just like
won the
size of
popular
the
vote.
inauguration crowd. Fake
Well,
news.
the common person in Rome didn't elect the dictator, did they?
No.
So
That's
who would
that.
you
We should
have-
get back
who
to
would you
that.
hand
actually.
the electoral power to then?
We should talk about this because I wanted to bring this up anyways. The modern idea of like enlightened democracy where individuals think about an issue and then somehow come to their own conclusion, right? I don't think that's really true nowadays, and I'm guilty of this just as much as everyone, right? I'm not looking up every single issue and, you know,
And there's elections like pretty frequently that I
Yeah.
just ignore
Yeah.
local elections and
Exactly.
stuff. Which, if I really wanted to make a difference, I should devote a lot more time and energy to that.
And I think our current political system relies on the assumption that people are going to be thinking and critically like coming to their own conclusions, which just isn't true. You know, like I'm guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of it. And I think a large a thing that can sway a large portion of the voting is like ads, right? And whoever, if you're exposed to an idea more or a good message more, regardless of what the policy actually does, you'll be more inclined to vote for it, right? So is that a good system of like whoever has the most
money in advertising?
Yeah, can sway the election?
I mean, no.
No. I disagree with the idea that just by singing enough, like, you almost inevitably have to start to think that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think people have a certain amount of...
Yeah.
You have control over it. In a perfect world, like, you'd think about it when you saw it, but we don't live in a perfect world where, you know, you're going to think about it. If you just see it and you're not, like, someone who's going to go out, like, and search it on their own, just seeing that image is going to be like, well, that seems like a good thing. It seems like the thing to do.
That name. Let's go with that one.
But don't you think the opposite also happens when you see like a political ad for an issue you didn't even know existed before, but you see it and you're like, oh, like these people seem stupid. Like, so they told me to vote this way. If I do vote, I know I won't vote their way now just because they came off so poorly in the advertisement. So I think it can, like...
the point is, like, you shouldn't be basing anything off of just those ads.
Right.
You should, like, make up your own mind.
Yeah, ideally you want to make up your own mind, right?
Yeah.
But we don't live in that. Like, have you been a perfect enlightened, like, Enlightenment thinker era person? You know, like, in those documents, they're like, citizens will come to their conclusions on their own after, like, looking at the facts. And that's... No one's, like, perfect like that, right?
Yeah, no. And
Right.
I don't know.
So
there
what's the
could be
next
debate
best
over
thing,
what
right?
is a fact anyway?
Exactly.
What's an opinion?
Yeah.
So what's the next best thing if that's not possible? Do we have to just accept
that would be more possible
through education?
Ideally, through education, yeah. It would never be, like, perfectly possible, but I feel like more people would actually learn to think for themselves.
That's true.
Yeah, I think the main problem is...
Maybe we should teach philosophy.
The main problem isn't, like, people being, like, bombarded with messages. Because I think in most of those cases, before they even see the message, they already have their mind set to vote one way or the other for, like, how they've been raised, or... I think that's usually
the
it.
divisive politics in this country.
And I think that goes, like, left or right, you know, either way, depending on, like, your political leaning. If your parents have strong political leanings, I think most people either just inherit those or, like, rebel against those, and that either of those doesn't involve much critical thought.
See, I wouldn't say that's necessarily true.
Not all the time.
I mean...
I would say that's more true. That's, like, the bigger problem.
Family definitely plays, like, a big role in, like, what you're, you know, like, that's what you're exposed to, right? So you can either accept it or reject, like, rebel against it.
That's true. I guess, like, your environment, no matter what it is going to ultimately determine,
a huge
like...
role.
But... I don't know, things like going to college, you get away from your parents, and then you're exposed to more things, and then you have both sides to choose from, ideally. So
yeah, I think people still mostly have their minds made up by then. By, like, when do you think most people, like, establish their firm political beliefs?
I think college is mostly like around your teens, late teens to 20s, early 20s is when most people make up their mind.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have my mind made up until, I don't know, earlier this year. So, and I was raised, my dad's very conservative, my mom's moderate, and I'm, like, very liberal, just since coming to college. So I don't think my parents really had that much to do with it. I feel like it was more like once you're exposed to more ideas, right? Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like once you get to college, it's not necessarily too late to change your views based on personal experience.
What about people who don't go to college? What can be done for them?
That's the thing.
Well, I mean, would making college, like, free, right? Easier for people to get into, because our college is ridiculous. But would that help, right? Because then people are exposed to more ideas and, like, from a more critical point of view.
I don't think the solution is to get more people going to college.
You don't think education would help?
No, I think it would, but I don't think that has to be like college.
Yeah.
I think
mean,
that's more like a cultural thing, because I think the most powerful change is always people doing that like somewhat independently, you know, whether they're at college or not.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, if you're coming to that conclusion on your own, it's going to mean more than someone telling it to you, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I think you can't come to that conclusion on your own unless you're exposed to more different perspectives.
it's harder,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely much more difficult. I mean, Genghis Khan did it, right?
Yeah. Where did his beliefs come from?
Just the sky.
Yeah, there was no reflection of his beliefs in like the world he grew up in.
Yeah, so it's possible, right?
Yeah,
like
just
some
through
complete like nomad came to
Yeah.
like some crazy views. One of my friends just said the solution is World War III.
Oh, I mean,
If you have less people, it would make things a lot simpler.
that would help some things for sure.
This sounds like the plot to Kingsman.
Hey, spoilers.
No, the original.
We're
original
freaking out. That's okay. That came out like 5 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, there's maybe some truth to that, right? If like a disaster happens, right, people are more willing to
Yeah.
act as a unit.
That's a crutch, though.
It is a crutch.
Because then we'll always be relying on a disaster.
Do we just come back to the old philosophy
Of what?
of just like if you teach people philosophy, maybe they'll be more inclined to like think about ideas they encounter?
I think so. I don't see how someone could be taught philosophy and come to the conclusion that they don't want to think about things if they're taught it like, well.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
No thanks. I'd rather be ignorant.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather just accept it passively. Thank you.
But we're talking about dictatorships and if people
Dictatorships,
could
right.
elect them.
I don't know if that could work in America, but
It'd be tough. You'd have to have like a few practice rounds to really, because I think once people knew they were electing someone with total power,
they
that-
might put more thought into it.
I think so. Because I think most people are jaded about.
Like
That's
American
true.
political
That's
system.
true. People
yeah.
think the president's just like a figurehead.
Yeah.
When-
Which, in some sense, like he is.
yeah,
Yeah.
but he does have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Too much.
definitely. There's some power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's any power at all, you should really consider it. You know, I mean, who are you to be like, it's not important enough for my effort? It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I mean, those people have control over like a lot of what goes on in your life, and you're just
Yeah.
passively like accepting it. That's
Yeah,
not
even if it
good.
is a figurehead, it's very important, you know, as like a symbol to the world.
It is. It's a representative to the rest of the world, like what this country deems important.
Let's look at other governments too.
Okay.
Like what do we? I know what I think is like better, but do you guys have any like examples of how you think like a country operating right now that you think has a better government or a more well-rounded government system than ours?
It's so hard to say because I do think America deals with issues that most other countries don't have to.
That's
And
true.
is that because of its government? Probably some of them, but
Could be.
I think America is not like special in any like good way over other countries. But I think due to like its cultural and like historical place, it has like different like, I mean, people like come to America, right?
Yeah.
More than maybe other countries for like, because they want to, even still. And I think that like
It
creates,
might be changing.
right.
Yeah, I mean, and one reason that a lot of the policies from other countries might not work in the U.S. is because we have so much more like diversity and a mixture of different ethnicities and cultures that come here that like it's so much harder to please everyone. Whereas in a more homogeneous society, like I want to say Denmark, maybe like you don't see that much diversity. So you see a lot more like universally accepted, good, you know, progressive programs.
Right. Where those people have like been living there for generations. you know?
Yeah. And we also have a pretty large population
Right.
in
Yeah,
general
it's true.
compared to other countries. So
And we're big.
that's what I just said.
Just like geographically.
Geographically. Which makes it harder.
Logistically, it is a nightmare.
Do you think, this is kind of an aside, but
Yeah,
we were
let's just go for it.
we were talking about internet earlier, right? Do you think it could work where not everyone does have access to the internet, even in America, you know, for sure. But do you think a form of government could work where it's more direct democracy, so like an issue comes like up and then people like vote on it, and like the easiest way to do that would be like over the internet, and that like people would have more like direct control over the course like the government takes, instead of like electing people who then might decide on issues how you thought they would, but then might not. Like it could just be more direct, and would that be a good thing if it's even like could be implemented?
So, like having the people vote on an issue directly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like
The same issue arises though, that like people won't educate themselves
right.
well enough to like make the decision.
Yeah, that's the problem with politics, right? Is that you need to have such a specialized branch because the problems and like that are being tackled in there, the layman's not going to understand that, you know, because it's just so jargony and it deals with such abstract issues.
Is that only because we've like people have never even been exposed to it in a way they could feel like a part in like controlling it, you know? Could be like slowly like changed, where if people are given more control, they will like educate themselves more one way or the other, you know. I'm not saying it would happen like overnight.
Maybe. I see the need for like a dedicated political branch of government and like a dedicated political sector of society, right?
I do too. I guess just in that case,
Yeah.
its role would just be like to decide what issues will be voted on.
Yeah.
Because they have that expertise.
And I think ideally what you'd want is like groups that are nonprofit and like totally bipartisan, which is a hard thing to do in this country. But groups like that could give you analysis of what those policies, like what the implications would mean. Because then you could look and be like, oh, okay, then I don't like what happens with this policy, so I'll just go for the other one or something like that. And not have to understand and like come to those conclusions yourself.
Do you think those resources aren't really available like through the internet?
Like the means to coming to that conclusion? I mean, there's already like groups like that, right? Like with healthcare, already does estimates on stuff like that, but it's much harder if you're not exposed to it, you know, and know what to look for.
Yeah, I think people will just tell you what they think the implications are going to be. So if you have like one like organization that can, without bias, explain like the implications of both sides of an issue, and everyone could agree that that's correct, then maybe like that could work.
Yeah, that's a tall order.
I feel like it's very unrealistic.
It is.
The whole
That's what I'm like.
situation.
Ideally,
Yeah.
But I mean, to get a totally neutral third party,
Yeah.
it would almost have to just be a computer that
Yeah.
does simulations for you.
So what do you think's worse, like ignorant people directly deciding things, or ignorant people electing people based off their views, who then can like go with or not like the people who voted for him? Because that just feels like a like double like derivative of like poor beliefs, you know? It's like people with maybe like unresearched beliefs voting for people who can then like not even like follow those people. And that's what we have right now.
Yeah. There's not much accountability for what happens now because a lot of like voting is just based on political lines, right? So regardless of like whether the person in office does a good job. It's just kind of like, well, they're a Republican or they're a Democrat, so I'm going to vote for them. And you never get any changes like that.
So we need to completely overthrow the entire two-party
We
system.
need to seize the means of production. That's what I'm saying. Not really. That's communism. Yeah, we got some dead air here. So, any other thoughts?
We were talking about other countries we might think have good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Then we kind of said, well, it doesn't even apply to America.
Yeah, well, it could apply to
It
America.
could.
I think it would just be more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like
I
universal
think America
healthcare.
just has like a lot going on that like people haven't worked through yet,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like going back to the Civil War where like I don't know, people are not okay with you taking their freedom, whatever that means, right? And that's like the gun debate or whatever.
Mhm.
But once you get over that initial part, I think people will be more willing to. And like take the metric system, for example. Like if we switch to the metric system, yeah, it might be inconvenient for a year or two while you're still learning it. But after that, everything will be like a lot simpler, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And same with like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of stuff like that. Like once you get over the initial fear of like, oh wait, they're taking away what I know, then you can get to, and that's like with the gun debate, right? It's like, oh, they're taking away my guns.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to mean, I don't know, I'm less free to defend myself or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do we want to get into the whole gun debate right now?
No, but that's just a good, like, a foil for the whole, like, freedom situation, because
It is, yeah, because that's
what the debate's about, really.
currently, yeah.
Do you think, I'm going to ask you guys to predict the future here.
Prediction's a game for fools.
Do you think 50 years from now,
When everything's automated and nobody has a job anymore.
well, I'm not
It's
even,
true.
you don't have to think about that, but do you think the gun debate issue, I'm not going to say will be resolved, but do you think it'll be changed in like a major way from it is now, like current gun policy? Or do you think it'll, like nothing will have changed?
I feel like time isn't going to be enough of a catalyst. 'Cause we've had so many catastrophic incidents and we've done practically nothing since Columbine.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of that was not enough to spur action, like I kind of doubt that anything will be.
I think it has. Okay, go ahead.
I would disagree with that because I think time is enough of a catalyst just because people with those like views on gun control that have lived with that and like raised with it, they're kind of dying
They're gonna
off.
die.
And it's
That could be, but I mean, they have kids who might have inherited their
yeah,
own
and that's a weird thing
views.
too, is like people with more traditional beliefs, right, tend to have more kids, whereas people with more progressive beliefs have like less kids. So eventually the tables might turn back.
Oh my gosh.
I know it's a scary
Unless
thought.
everyone
That's
goes to
like
college and becomes
assuming,
enlightened.
kids are just clones. of
I
their parents.
know.
But yeah, maybe. I think 50 years from now, it will be solved, air quotes.
I hope so.
And
Yeah.
also, like, if you look at the success of other countries with it, like Australia and Great Britain, right, then people will be more okay with it. But I guess, like, people haven't looked into those studies enough yet.
Right.
People have been talking about Australia.
Yeah, John Curtin, what a guy.
Yeah. But I also do think, like, you said, like, since Columbine, right? And that feels like such a long time ago, and it is. But I think in the time scale of, like, these big freedom issues, it really isn't.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Like a different example, but like women's right to vote, right? That was in 1919, I believe, women got the right to vote. But I'm sure, like, it wasn't like that year people were like, hey, we want to change this. It was like generations.
true.
And I think for big issues like this, that's how it always has to be.
But in other countries, it didn't take that long,
Right.
like in Australia.
Right. And I think that
Yeah.
kind of goes back to
Like
what you were saying
they're
about
more
like,
homogeneous than us, so
Yes.
they can make decisions quicker.
Yes.
That could be.
And
or is their government like? What's their government system
I
like?
think it's a
Which country?
parliament.
Australia.
Yeah, they have a parliament. I think. I said that pretty confidently, but
I'm really willing to bank on it.
we'll get the stats guy on it. We'll get Carl on it.
Yeah. And with the country so varied as America, I think making quick decisions is way more dangerous than not changing something right away, even if it should be, because it's so hard to make that call. You know, these issues might seem obvious to us, but I think quick change.
Yeah, but if you want to be on the cutting edge, right?
Do we, though?
Do we want to be on the cutting edge?
Because you know what's on the cutting edge? The edge.
The blade.
And yeah, the blade. Then you fall off.
Yeah, they have a parliament system, by the way. Carl just got back to me. I think ideally you do want to try and be on the cutting edge, right? Like, think about Japan, right, who is dealing with the aging crisis right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're, like, forced into that situation, but they're also going to be much better equipped than other countries.
Which is why we should get a head start.
Yeah, so if you, like, start implementing those and, like, experimenting different systems right now, not saying, like, committing to one or another, but, like, at least just testing it out, then you'll be better prepared in the future when it comes crunch time and you have to act on those.
I agree with that.
That's good. Consensus has been reached. Anyone else gonna say something?
I think change takes time,
It does.
and
it does.
thank God it does.
I think change takes time, and sometimes it needs to be much more rapid than it is.
Well, I don't know. Change, like, should take a while, but, like, in our society, we see change as so much quicker just because information can, like, be transferred quicker, which is, like, we get back to what we said at the beginning. Is that a good thing, right? If you're acting on that information right away. And it, I mean, ideally, if, like, the information's accurate, then yeah, you'd want to, like, act on it right away. But
How do you know?
how do you know what's right and wrong if information's coming at
Right.
you so quick?
And I also think change has to be made for the right reasons. You know, regardless if, like, the change would be the same, like the same outcome, if, like, the reasons behind it are flawed, I think that eventually results in, like, continued, like, problems.
So, if the change is to preserve the right to life, do you think that's important enough to speed it up a little bit?
That's such a vague, like, I mean, such different groups use that same argument for, like, their beliefs, like pro-life and pro-choice groups both use, like, the right to life as, like, their main argument. So
I guess that's true, but
I'd say pro-choice would be, like, the right to happiness, pursuit of happiness. And since you can never know what makes someone else happy, you can't, like, dictate it for them.
but can't you like not even have the pursuit of happiness if you don't already have the right to your own life?
Yeah. Well, like, the pro-lifers are saying, like, you have to have the kid because, like, it's alive.
Right.
right. But so many pro-lifers are also pro-gun.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's a lot of hypocrisy in that group.
That's true. I mean, I feel like that's kind of unrelated.
Yeah. But I do, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
Neither. It kind of spiraled.
Yeah, that's why we need an outline. But government, right? Government.
Do we even need one?
Yeah.
Do we even
Okay.
need one?
Okay, if we're assuming.
Can we just have anarchy? Do we? If we think, well, it's a good point to get into, right? Like, do we even need government? Because I think most people would agree government's better than anarchy, right?
But anarchy has a negative connotation.
It doesn't.
It does. Have, like, mayhem and, like, destruction. I don't think it necessarily has to be like that.
You think there could be civil anarchy?
There's an anarchist society in Denmark that my friend Aaliyah studied abroad in Copenhagen. this summer, and she went to the Anarchist Society, and they have 9 rules, and like 6 of them are basically no weapons, just reworded differently.
Then are they anarchists?
I was going to say, these guys sound like weaker anarchists. But, you know...
But like there's no other structure, basically, other than that.
And all the most violent acts in history have always been perpetrated by governments, not anarchists. So, I rest my case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anarchy.
Like,
So if we agree anarchy is worse than having a government, so we need, most people would say that. I'd say the general consensus would be that, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay, we've got some head nods. Then if we're accepting that, then I guess ideally you'd want to have the most people involved in the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since you can never know someone else's needs.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I guess we haven't gotten to that point yet, really, where everyone has an equal voice. Mainly?
Theoretically, they do.
Well,
No, not
that's-
really.
That's the root of a lot of issues, like
Yeah.
in our society, protests and stuff.
If everyone had an equal voice, then hopefully everyone would have that. I think another problem with our society is people not accepting restrictions too, which is on both sides. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's hard to place restrictions on people when the people making those decisions of what those restrictions are also people, you know? No one's removed fully from the situation.
So do we need an AI to run the government?
I think with the kind of government most people believe they want, then they would want an AI to do that.
Thank you. I rest my case.
I think here's my ideal government right here. All right. Anyone can use this if they want. It would be controlled by an AI. All right. That makes all manufacturing and
what's it based on?
what's it based on?
What's the AI basing its decisions on?
That would have to be decided when it's created.
Okay.
On what the current society thinks it wants. And then the AI would have to be adaptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be able to change. And I think the best way to do that for the most people, it would sacrifice efficiency, but I think it would increase contentment in the system, would be for the AI to bring moral issues and ethical issues to a vote where everyone would have the opportunity to vote, but they wouldn't be required to. And if the issue passed without a majority voting, it would be brought to again.
Okay. So, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because historically in the past, when people try and legislate morals without talking to
Right.
the consensus or getting a consensus from the people, it has been not good.
Yeah, it would have to be a majority vote. So, if 4 options were presented and the highest one got 30%, then the lowest option would be removed and they'd vote on it again until one got more than 50%.
Okay. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like
It sounds
It
nice.
sounds very inefficient.
Well, the
The
AI
AI
would
would
be
be-
handling everything besides that.
Yeah, if an AI is in charge of all,
Production and
efficiency.
resources.
it would almost be like communism, but without someone in charge of it.
Right. Or people having to work
Yeah.
jobs they don't like.
Yeah. It's coming. 40 years.
And yeah, I'm going to predict that is the future if we make it that far.
It seems like that's what people want,
Yeah.
right? We want a government that will care for basic needs and allow for you to pursue spiritual interests or hobbies or whatever, right? And to get the means for that, to the most people, you need welfare programs, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
for example, like a safety net or like social welfare for unemployment people, so they can get back and provide to society. So that's what it seems what people want, at least right now.
Mm-hmm. And would they be sad in that world because they wouldn't have a job to fulfill them? Perhaps. But I would say...
Would their souls be crushed?
I would say if you need a job to bring you fulfillment, then that's not even true happiness. You're just like deluding yourself.
Yep. And then you need philosophy.
Yeah.
So, like, describe what that transition of power would look like.
We'd have to... there'd be, like, intermediary forms of government different from our own.
I think it would have to start out becoming like a global union.
Yeah.
Something like that where... I mean, let me just like rant.
You ever
about
seen
this.
Star Trek?
Let me just rant about this really quick. Americans are like so against the EU, but the EU is like one of the most American things, right? Because it's all about a confederacy of countries, and that's all America is, a confederacy of states. And so like it's a logical next step of saying, well, like the EU doesn't control the countries entirely. It's not like micromanaging, but it says like, oh, this is like a general, like, we're going to do this for the good of the people by like removing whatever. And then the countries are like, okay, right? That's, I don't know. I feel like that's the most American like idea, is like having a confederacy that can govern states that can't be trusted to look after the world's best interest, right? So hopefully we'll get to a point with a global union, and then maybe arrive at like, okay, well, now that we have a global union, let's look into making it more efficient with an AI.
Yeah. Once people like generally agree on what they want, which will take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Millennia.
Millennia. Man, we're going to be here a while.
Here's a...
It'll happen quicker once machines take over.
Yeah, here's kind of a, I guess, a end thinker I just thought of. Do you guys fear for the future? Yes or no? Just answer it however you interpret that.
No.
Okay.
No.
Hey, all right, me neither.
Sweet.
All right, that's
Dude.
the show.
Yeah, we've got... I guess we could just leave it with that then.
Well, we don't have to.
I mean,
Do you want to expand on that?
No.
Okay.
We can just leave it with that. We'll save it for another episode or whatever. But, yeah, so I hope you guys out there like enjoyed that. I know we got a couple listeners right now.
We have listeners?
We have listeners.
Oh, my God. Hello.
Oh, yeah, we have a competition next week. So everyone out there listening, yeah, I'm talking to you, Tim and Nate. I need you to download an app. It's called Radio FX, I think. Yeah, Radio FX. Search for Red Hawk Radio, and then listen to the show on that next week. And if we have the most listeners, then we get to win $50.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, so tell everyone. Tell Paul.
Tell your school.
I'll get Carl on it. He'll be
tell your
downloading
county.
it.
Yeah, because the other shows, I mean, one of them might have 3 listeners.
Oh, yeah, we're
So-
definitely up there in the top notch of the shows.
And we could reinvest that into the show for you guys.
Exactly. I'm going to get a soundboard with that.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's right. Then Ben won't have to make the sounds. But yeah, that would be cool. So if you are interested in supporting the show, tell people to listen next week on the app, because that's the only way they can track views, apparently. This system, guys, it's terrible. But
Wouldn't it be
Let's overthrow
listens?
it.
listeners, viewers, whatever, same thing. So yeah, that's cool. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that. And I guess I'm supposed to tell you about the next show after us, but I won't, because I don't care about
We're
them.
trying to win here.
Yeah, we're trying. Next week, after the competition's over, sure, I'll do it. But this week, no mercy. So yeah, have a good weekend, guys. It's fall break here, so we're chilling. I don't know if everywhere has fall break, but
No.
not
I think
everyone.
So.
Not
Some
everywhere.
already have too.
Okay, well, we're on break right now, so everyone in Miami listening, enjoy the fall break, and everyone else, just have a great weekend. So we'll see you next week, and tune in on the app next week. So thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
I hate everybody because I am so troubled. I have so much pain burning and melting my brain. Everyone fucks me over and no one cares about my suffering. I can't understand why, because I've only got one race, religion, sexual orientation, and color on my mind. It's mine, and don't tell me you're thinking about anything else because don't you remember? I don't care. Don't want to share your pain. Don't deign to be fair because I'm unconcerned, unstable, and unaffected. I'm affected, sleazy, and cheesy. I'm queasy and still ill. I haven't had my fill of my pain or heard enough of my voice.